the week. High temperatures and high humidity can be dangerous for people who spend too much time outdoors. In fact, heat waves are the leading cause of weather-related deaths in the U.S., topping even floods and tornadoes. According to the CDC, more than 600 people in the U.S. are killed by extreme heat every year. That compares to 80 tornado deaths a year. Last year, 145 people were killed in flooding. People at the greatest risk of heat-related illnesses include young children, people over 65, and those with pre-existing conditions. To beat the heat, experts recommend drinking plenty of water and avoiding the sun. Find out about other ways to stay safe in the heat, which includes the importance of sunscreen, by going to this story on KELOland.com. Well, people in Rapid City will have one less option to cool off during the hot weekend. The Roosevelt Park 50-meter outdoor pool will be closed today due to staffing shortages. The indoor Roosevelt Swim Center will be open today. Well, let's get the latest on the hot weather with meteorologist Adam Rutt in the Storm Center. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Perry, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, it is going to be a dangerously hot day today. If you do have any outdoor plans, please be careful and plan accordingly. We're already at 77 at the airport as we take a look at Great Bear this morning. A southerly breeze is in place at 18 miles per hour, but it's a southerly breeze. It's not going to do much to help us. 80 your number this morning in Phillip and Aberdeen, 83 Sisseton, 81 in Winter. There is a 68-degree reading up in Buffalo, 59 in Custer, 70 Rapid City, but that's a little solace considering just how hot it's going to be as we head into the afternoon. We do again have that wind. It's definitely in place, so we don't have a stagnant air mass over KELOland, but like I said, that's a southerly wind. All that's going to do is bring in more warm air, so we don't even get relief from that. So we do have our heat advisory in place for everybody shaded in orange along and east of the Missouri River Valley. This will be through the afternoon, into the evening, and even into the first part of your night for that matter. Excessive heat warnings north of Marshall toward Yellow Medicine County points north. Regardless, you do have the potential to see heat index values approaching and even exceeding 100 to 105 degrees over the course of the afternoon, which is why we've been really kind of trying to drill home the point that you need to be careful if you're going to be out and about today. We'll talk about the rest of your 7-day forecast as we head through the hour.
All right, thank you very much, Adam. Well, Saturday's hot weather didn't keep people from attending the Pride Parade and Festival in downtown Sioux Falls. KELOland's Renee Ortiz spoke with those attending the event to find out what this gathering meant to them.
Everybody shares this feeling of community and love, and it's just a really happy time to all get together.
Sioux Falls Pride President Matt Neufeld estimated that 5,000 people were on hand for the parade, also telling KELOland News that others thought there were more.
We brought our kids, our spouses, our girlfriends, our boyfriends, our neighbors, because this is all about community, and that includes making everyone feel they're welcome.
The day was filled with celebration, vibrant outfits, and lots of excitement.
It's so fun, and everyone here is so nice, and it's just a fun parade, and everyone's so happy.
For many, this event means so much more than a festival.
It makes me feel so loved knowing that our community in Sioux Falls really supports us and wants us to be here and embraces us.
I feel like when you're here, you're not really going to get judged for just being yourself.
Just seeing like everybody coming down and like just showing their spirit and stuff, it made me almost cry. And it just, I love that Sioux Falls is just showing how much pride they have. And I feel like it gives me hope for the world.
In Sioux Falls, Renee Ortiz, KELOland News.
And this year's festival was held for the first time at the 8th and Railroad to handle the larger crowds. Well, don't stray too far from the air conditioner today. Meteorologist Adam Rutt is tracking more hot weather ahead. He'll tell us when we can expect a break from the heat next in his forecast. Stay with us.
The exclusive.
Itching to punch back. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why he wants to run for president early. I think that's part of the reason why he did lash out at Pence at an event on Friday.
And released, I think, a dozen pages.
A 12-page
response, which was litigate everything he had said.
I do want to talk exactly about that because the Times has a story this morning suggesting that maybe the 12-page rebuttal was actually part of a legal strategy to maybe inoculate himself, Trump, from further legal jeopardy. I mean, where do you think things stand, Carrie, in terms of What is the real criminal exposure for Trump and perhaps for some of these others who are implicated here?
Well, I think there were two main things, I think, that came out of the hearings this week that moved the needle forward a little bit. One is that there was so much evidence presented that he knew at the time, that he was informed at the time that he was involved in this pressure campaign against the Justice Department, against the Vice President, against state election officials, that it was illegal, that it would be a violation of the Electoral Count Act. And we know that in part also because a judge that ordered the release of his lawyer, John Eastman's emails, did so on the crime fraud exception. Right. Meaning that there had to be evidence of a crime, that he believed there was evidence of a crime that then broke the attorney-client privilege. So we know that there is
a crime on Eastman's part,
yes,
or a crime on Trump's part?
Well, just that a crime was committed. That
yeah.
a crime was in play, and so therefore it justified producing these emails, which were the communications between the lawyer, Eastman, and the president in terms of his emails between them. And so there is more evidence that they knew that it was illegal. And so I think the committee really did move forward on that this week.
Yeah, I want to talk about Mike Pence for a second, because he is there's just such an undercurrent, especially the hearing was about Mike Pence on Thursday, but he has been staying out of the fray. He gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal where he was basically like, you know, I'm going to battleground states to test the waters, but I don't want to attack Trump. I mean, he could emerge as the hero of this story and seems to not really want to be. It's a little bit puzzling.
I mean, I don't think he's holding back all that much. You're talking about him being in the media, specifically the Wall Street Journal. Yeah. We're talking about his entire circle of people didn't just subpoena, but spoke very forthrightly, right, in describing the pressure campaign on him. Nothing happens without his say-so. All these people are lawyers. They know how to sit in a deposition and give answers in a way that would give one image or another, and they chose to give a very specific one. So in a way, he's walking that line, right? Making sure everyone and their mother knows how quote-unquote heroic he was during that time, and at the same time not being the one that you can show sound bites and clips of speaking against Trump.
Yeah, he wants to have it both
at
ways.
At some point, that is going to have to come to a head.
I interviewed Pence in Iowa in April, and to your point, Audie, he wants to have it both ways, right? He wants to embrace what he calls the Trump-Pence agenda, which he mentioned in Iowa when I was there at a county GOP speech at least a half dozen times. But at the same time, he hasn't spoken to Trump for a year now. He's obviously okaying his staff to openly confront Trump about January 6th. Those pictures that we saw leaked this week don't get out without Pence's permission. And so this is the great question, is can Pence sort of tell GOP voters, you can get Trump without the crazy effectively if you support me? But at the same time, you know, I broke from that man. I think that's a really hard line to walk.
Or think of it another way, who is the Pence constituency?
And
is there one created after this
This is the real
week?
question. I mean, you could look at Brian Kemp, you could look at some of the Republicans who have survived being on the wrong side of Trump, but I don't think that that's a consistent enough picture to say there's a constituency for a Pence without Trump.
Who are those voters?
Yeah. Before we go, Carrie, I mean, I want to ask you about what's coming up next. The DOJ wants these transcripts from the January 6th committee. They're probably going to get them at some point, but why? What's coming up next, and how do they play into some of these prosecutions that are underway, and maybe the ones that I have some questions. I mean, where is the prosecution of John Eastman, for example?
Sure. So we know that the Justice Department is conducting its own massive investigation, and that's including the people who attacked the Capitol. That now has moved into the people who, the Oath Keepers and the other far-right groups that are charged with seditious conspiracy. And so now the Justice Department wants these transcripts because there are likely some people that have been interviewed in a part of the committee's investigation, which is a political process, not a legal process, but that are the same people who have been interviewed by the Justice Department. So they could be looking for either evidence of crimes of individuals that they already have spoken to or they have subjects of investigation. They also could be looking for exculpatory evidence or inconsistencies between things that people maybe told the committee versus things that they may have been interviewed by the Justice Department or the FBI. And so the committee, you know, the committee doesn't have a huge staff. So I do wonder if it simply is a manpower, I don't know, but I wonder if it's just a manpower issue that they have not been able to comply with this Justice Department request. But they'll get those documents over, and the investigators are going to need to pour through those documents to look for evidence, to look for exculpatory, and to look for inconsistent statements.
And of course, some members of the committee have said, we're not done yet. This is an ongoing process. We're still collecting evidence. And so that's one of the reasons they've said that it hasn't been turned over yet. But stand by for us. Carrie, thank you so much. And coming up next, can President Biden convince voters to blame Republicans for inflation? He's certainly going to try.
100 years ago.
Officially this week, after the gates of that iconic park were closed by historic flooding. Last week, floodwaters cut off access to roads and even to park entrances. While the full park may not reopen for months, parts of the southern loop that provide access to attractions like Old Faithful will open on Wednesday. Let's turn now and get a quick check of your local Father's Day Sunday weather.
It's going to be another hot and humid day across the region, along with those strong southerly winds. Temperatures in the Sioux Falls area should make a run for 100 degrees this afternoon with plenty of sunshine. In Aberdeen, we should crack triple digits toward today. We'll get up to about 103 for a high temperature today. We were just shy of 100 yesterday. And in Pierre, we'll also make a run for 100 degrees as well. But in the afternoon, we will have a chance of a few pop-up showers and thunderstorms.
Straight ahead, the highs and lows of the week, including the beautiful graduation surprise when the senior class stopped by in caps and gowns to thank their beloved kindergarten teacher. And some solace for dads on this Father's Day, knowing even the very coolest among us embarrasses his kids in public. But up next, our Sunday focus on what the raising of interest rates this week means for your ability to buy or sell a house, and why one potentially risky mortgage is popular again.
The difference in that rate between fixed and the ARM was enough to either price me out or price me in.
It's all coming up on Sunday Today.
Wayfair has everything I need.
Are you willing to die?
Yes. I know where I go. I can die every day.
Emma, really testament to the strength of women in this country. Meanwhile, a UK intelligence report suggesting that Russian morale is likely troubled, which could limit them from reaching their goals going forward. Janae?
An incredible show of strength there, Britt. Thank you so much. Back here at home now to the crush of air travelers on just this Juneteenth holiday weekend. The most flyers screened by TSA since Thanksgiving. ABC's Ellen Lopez is at Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta, one of those airports where thousands of travelers have been dealing with canceled and delayed flights. Elwin, good morning. It's a tough go out there.
It sure is, Janae. Good morning. We are heading into the summer and travel is already heating up. Airlines juggling to keep up with that soaring demand.
This morning, travel chaos at airports across the country. The soaring demands, along with extreme weather, causing massive disruptions to the airline industry, already struggling with staffing shortages.
When there is a flight that gets canceled and all of a sudden 200 passengers need to be rebooked, there aren't a ton of empty seats available right now to get those passengers rebooked on.
Tens of thousands of passengers left stranded.
We all looked at each other and cried.
Mackenzie Roberts says 2 flight cancellations led to her missing a slew of celebrations, including a family wedding.
It's a 10 minutes till departure, and then not even 30 seconds later, it all went red and then went canceled.
Nationwide, at least 200 flights were delayed and more than 500 canceled.
We couldn't take it anymore. There were people that were boarding the flight that were screaming at the flight attendants. Everybody just wanted to leave and get home.
The long holiday weekend, coupled with Father's Day, triggering an uptick in people looking to hit the skies.
I've never seen it this packed.
On Friday alone, TSA checkpoints screened more than 2.4 million people, the highest number since Thanksgiving weekend.
Labor shortages are having an impact because if there are delays or cancellations, flight crews time out because they can only be on the clock for so long.
Some airlines now trimming summer routes to try and prevent any system-wide meltdowns.
And Delta pilots issued an open letter to passengers stating that they have flown a record amount of overtime, adding that if this keeps up by this fall, they will have flown more overtime this year than in all of 2018 and 2019 combined. Whit.
All right, Ellen, thank you. Now to a story breaking overnight. For the first time, workers at an Apple store voting to unionize. Deirdre Bolton has the details.
This morning, workers at an Apple store in Maryland voting overwhelmingly to unionize, becoming the first Apple store nationwide to successfully organize. Workers at the store in Townsend, outside Baltimore, voting by a nearly 2-to-1 margin, 65-33 to unionize. The culmination of a year-long union drive. Graham DeYoung is the lead genius at the store.
I just think Apple is, generally so progressive and liberal that, that it wouldn't have been so difficult for us.
Workers saying they want better opportunities for advancement, more time off between shifts, and better wages.
It was so nerve-wracking.
Tyra Reeder watched a live stream of the votes being counted, along with her team.
This is it. This is a really big moment.
The union workers voted to join the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, calling on Apple CEO to respect the results and fast-track the first contracts. Apple declining to comment. The vote coming amid a push by workers nationwide to organize for better wages and protections after decades of declines.
To the first union in American history.
Yeah. Amazon warehouse workers in New York City making history by voting to unionize in April. But workers at another warehouse in Staten Island overwhelmingly voted against it a month later. And dozens of Starbucks locations organizing following 2 of the coffee giant stores in Buffalo forming a union. They say Apple has a week to appeal. Another example of more and more workers unionizing across the country. Eva?
Deirdre Bolton for us there. Thank you. Well, Yellowstone National Park will let visitors back in starting on Wednesday. The park shut down last week after catastrophic flooding destroyed bridges and roads in the area. Visitors will be allowed back into the southern loop of the park. Park Service is implementing a temporary license plate system where even numbers have access on one day and odd the other, just to manage the crowds.
And that flooding out west comes on the heels of a lot of heat. Time now for a check of the weather. Meteorologist Danielle Breezy from our affiliate WKRN in Nashville, tracking that heat.
Yes, indeed. I advertise that the heat is moving east, guys, and as I go back to Nashville, it's going to feel like the triple digits by Tuesday. In fact, take a look at this. Chicago, you're in the 80s today as well as Nashville. By Monday, Tuesday, in the mid to upper 90s. Dallas, Texas, triple digits starting tomorrow. And it's not just the heat that we're talking about. We also are talking about today severe weather threat. Now, this is going to be up in the northern plains. You can see large hail, damaging winds, and even an isolated tornado cannot be ruled out. So this area really needs to pay attention to the weather. And it's not just that today. We're also talking about an enhanced fire danger. We've got red flag warnings up through Salt Lake City, down to Flagstaff here. This is going to be because of gusty winds, not to mention very low humidity. So we're going to be watching for that very carefully. That's a look at what's happening around the country. Here's what's happening where you live.
It's going to be another hot and humid day across the region, along with those strong southerly winds. Temperatures in the Sioux Falls area should make a run for 100 degrees this afternoon with plenty of sunshine. In Aberdeen, we should crack triple digits toward today. We'll get up to
which will be proud for you and for many for the
labor. So the work from home revolution has allowed
you and drink from it. For this is the chalice of my blood.
Life. Avera. Moving.
It was Austria-Hungary's city, the most important, most eastern city of the empire. There's
Silver. He's the editor-in-chief at Investopedia, and frankly, he's a lot smarter than me about this stuff. Caleb, let's start at the fundamental point here. What does this rate hike mean for the average American?
Well, good to be with you, and happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, especially mine. But this rate hike, thank you. This rate hike means anything that you finance, anything that is tied to the Fed funds rate, those interest rates are going up, and things like car loans are going up. Mortgages have already risen. The 30-year fixed now up above 6% in some places. That's going up as well. Any sort of credit card interest rate, floating APR, that's going up as well. The Fed sets what we call the prime rate, the overnight lending rate. That's the rate at which banks loan money to each other, and all rates are set after that, on top of that. So rates have already been moving in that direction, moving higher, because everyone knows the Fed has to raise interest rates to cool down inflation, which is at a 40-year high. That's what they're doing. Expect a lot more of it through the rest of the year.
All right, so slowing down in the housing market, fewer people buying cars. The question, I guess, is Did Powell move too slowly? I mean, we knew inflation was a problem months, half a year ago. Would the economy be in a better place had he moved aggressively earlier?
Well, it is Powell, but it's also the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, that sets rates. And yes, the fact that they actually raised interest rates 0.75% last week, a very big raise, the largest in several years, shows that they were too late to the party, too late to cool down the economy, and inflation got out of control. We learned the week before that CPI, that's the Consumer Price Index, that rose again to 8.6%. That's another 40-plus year high. So that you can't have an economy with prices that high because it's hitting people where they pay the biggest bills. So gas prices, obviously, groceries, rent, airfare, electricity, fuel oil, all those prices are sky high. And the only way to cool them down is by raising interest rates, which makes people think twice about borrowing money to buy things.
All right, but there is a flip side to this argument, right? It comes from, articulated by former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich. He tweeted the following: "Why is the Fed raising interest rates? Because it assumes that inflation is being driven by wage increases. That's incorrect. Wages are lagging behind inflation. More accurate, corporations with outsized market power are driving up prices for profit." So Reich's argument is that this is corporate greed. Oil companies are making great profits, charging consumers a huge amount. They could charge less, but they're not. What are your thoughts on the Reich argument that this is really about consolidation, monopoly power, corporate greed?
Well, you could argue that because oil companies are making enormous profits, but what was happening when oil prices went negative, when there was no demand in the teeth of the pandemic? Were they actually losing money on purpose? No, this is a function of supply and demand. Maybe they're making extra profits now. Remember, anything over $50 a barrel for oil companies is pure profit. They're enjoying very high oil prices right now, these oil companies, and they're passing it right on down to the consumer. Gas prices, of course, over $5 across the country. So what the Federal Reserve is actually doing is trying to cool the economy, but not set it into a deep freeze by raising those interest rates. Those interest rates, as they go up, it makes businesses think twice about borrowing money to expand and hire more workers or potentially pay higher wages, but it also makes consumers think twice about making these big ticket purchases. That is going to cool the economy. The worry is that it sends the economy into a recession. That's very painful. Those can last quite a while, and it's very painful, especially for lower income folks.
That's an understatement. Recessions are very painful indeed. Caleb Silver, thank you so much for joining us, and as always, happy Father's Day. Now, right after the break, secretaries of state, they hold the keys to free and fair elections. Many far-right election deniers are on the ballot for the crucial position across the nation. What that could mean for American democracy in this crucial moment. This is Velshi.
We hit the bike trails every week.
This rally runs from August 5th to August 14th. In Sturgis, Sydney Thorson, KELO News.
And a full list of this year's Sturgis Motorcycle Rally events is listed under this story at KELOland.com. Adam?
Well, it's certainly going to be a hot day to be out.
Jack, if I get any of this wrong, but I think 80% of people who have committed crime or certainly paying the price for a crime grew up in homes without a father. I think it's 7 in 10 African-American kids are growing up in a home without a father. This is something that puts a child so far behind the 8 ball on success in life.
It really does, and it's an unfortunate thing because it's something that can be avoided, and it can be avoided by men, just like myself and Burgess and you will, going out there and breaking out of our own bubbles and helping those kids that are fatherless. With over 18 million kids fatherless in America, that's just a call of action is all it is. This Father's Day is just about a call of action. Go out there into the inner cities. Go out there into your own neighborhoods and suburbs and communities where there are tons of fatherless kids that just need that mentor and that support. I spent this week in juveniles. I've been to 3 juveniles this week, and spending time with kids that are fatherless, spending their Father's Day in jail. And so we have this going on all across our country. And I think right now on this Father's Day, it is a true call to action. And I also say this, it's also a time to respect and honor our Father in heaven. and remember that spirituality is the backbone of this nation, and that our Bible teaches us in the last chapter of the Old Testament, he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. And that's a message for everyone, and that is the true spirit of Father's Day.
And you know, Congressman, I think it'd be important to point out, it's not just the absence of fathers, but you know, in my personal estimation, I want to know what you have to say about this. It's also, we have denigrated masculinity. We denigrated the role of fatherhood in so many ways that even when the father is present, he's not really playing the role of the father more and more in society. And I don't want to be cliched, but whether or not that's discipline or, you know, tough love or whatever it may be, we've been taught all those things are toxic.
Yes. And by the way, Will, this is by accident. I need to make sure everybody understands that this is not the way the black community was when I was growing up. I grew up at a time when, as Jack was just mentioning, at that time, 98% of Americans believed in God. So you had men who truly understood that they were their servant to their family because they had an example of what servant was all about. But at the same time, keep this in mind, 40s, 50s, and 60s, the black community led the country in the growth of the middle class. Men matriculated from college. Men committed to marriage. Until 1970, more black women could predict getting married than white women, and men percentage of entrepreneurs. This was the community that I grew up in because we had men who understood their role was to provide, protect, and partner with their spouse, and to leave a good name. And what we have right now is an ideology that destroys the family. Understand, this is not by accident. Mm-hmm. We have an ideology of the hard left, Marxists and socialists, who hate the family unit, they hate God, they hate education, and they hate entrepreneurship. So this is what we're after, and men need to man up. Let's go out and serve. Get your eyes off yourself. Serve your community, serve your family, serve your wife. And that process of getting that, we'll get our country back. Yeah. We'll get our culture moving forward the way it should be.
It's a fascinating timeline, that you just laid out, Congressman. And the welfare state played no small role in that destruction of the nuclear family. All right, Jack, it's Father's Day, but it's also Juneteenth. It's our newest national holiday. You and I both hail from Texas. It was a local holiday. Now it's a national holiday. What's your message on Juneteenth?
You know, as a great-grandson of sharecroppers in Texas, this is a joyous day. It always has been all my life. It's a day that I knew I could smell the barbecue out on the pit. And I just have a message for America to remember what we've overcome and that we all should be celebrating this. This is not a holiday that you should politicize, please. So if you're politicizing it, stop it. This is a joyous day for so many people and a time for us to celebrate being the greatest nation on earth that put an end to the evils of slavery. And have overcome it, and now we have some of the most prosperous African American families in the world. And I just say amen today, all day, and it's just so cool to have Father's Day and Juneteenth fall on the same day.
Congressman, last word to you.
Just know that we live in the greatest country in the history of mankind. My great-great-grandfather not only escaped from slavery, but went out to start the first church, the first elementary in his community, and he was known as fiercely independent. That's the legacy we all have. We look back far enough, we'll find a man who stood up, fought for the freedom and opportunities for his family. We need to lean in hard, find who they are, and replicate them. Fathers will get our country coming back, and I want to wish everybody out there happy Father's Day. Let's not take this for granted. We need to fight to make sure that men understand, young boys, what their responsibility is when they grow up, to provide, protect, and partner. That's what good fathers do.
What a privilege to have two strong, honorable men on the program this morning, and Jack Brewer and Congressman Burgess Owens. Happy Father's Day to you both.
Thank you, Will. All the best, buddy.
Thank you.
God bless you, Will. Happy Father's Day.
All right, still ahead, making history. Mayra Flores becomes the first Mexican-born woman in Congress. Up next, meet two Hispanic women who hope to follow in her footsteps.
Dad and I finally had that talk.
Study, a ministry of pastorstudy.org.
Breakfast from Trevor.
Trevor Alter. His dad came into the studio once when he first started. They were super nice, his parents.
I saw his family has visited from Ohio, I guess maybe multiple times.
Yeah.
Very sweet. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Welcome back to GMA on this Sunday morning. That, of course, was our Trevor Alt sharing his thoughts on Father's Day. And we want to wish a happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. My husband, Charlie, I got to say that one.
Yeah.
But
my husband, Ed.
My dad, of course. I thought that was me for a second, by the way. I was like looking in a funhouse mirror. I was like, wait a minute, I don't remember recording that.
The younger, more handsome version.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, we got a lot to cover this morning, so let's take a look at some of the other headlines that we're following right now and happening today. More disturbing findings that we're learning as investigators look into the events that unfolded leading up to the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas last month. The New York Times reporting that an armed city police officer had the chance to shoot the gunman before he went inside the school and killed 21 people. But that officer hesitated, reportedly afraid he might harm some of the children.
Also right now, a scare for President Biden after he fell off his bicycle in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. The 79-year-old was stopping to talk to reporters when his foot got caught in the pedal guard as he was dismounting his bike. The president quickly got to his feet. Later, on his way out of church, Biden repeated that he was fine and hopped in place several times just to prove it.
And Neil Diamond wowed the crowd at Fenway Park in Boston last night. The singer, you can hear it there, gave the crowd an impromptu live rendition of his hit Sweet Caroline during the Boston Red Sox game.
We've been singing that song all morning, too. Once it's in your head, can't get it out.
Earworm.
It's
So
great.
it's stuck there all day. Well, we start this half hour with a 15-year-old's terrifying ordeal, police say, at the hands of human traffickers. Her parents sharing their story, hoping to help and warn others on how easy it is to become a victim in an exclusive interview with ESPN's Outside the Lines.
It was a big game. We're playing the Trailblazers. Our daughter, she loves going to the games.
It was supposed to be a fun daddy-daughter night. Kyle Morris taking his 15-year-old daughter to American Airlines Arena to watch a basketball game back in April. But after she didn't come back from the restroom around halftime, he started to worry and contacted security.
An off-duty officer walked up, and she told me that they had video of our daughter walking into the Lexus parking garage with a guy, and they said, you need to go home and you need to file a report.
Dallas police declined an interview request but referred to a Texas statute that says missing juveniles are runaways unless circumstances suggest they were abducted. Police saying a runaway report should be filed in the town where the juvenile lives. So Kyle Morris drove 30 miles home alone to make the report. 6 days later, his daughter was still missing, and the family reached out to the Texas Counter Trafficking Initiative.
He said to me, send me a couple of pictures of her.
He was able to reach out to us and go, I think I have a hit.
An investigator for the initiative found an online ad for sex with the Morris's daughter.
When I saw those photos of my daughter, I didn't recognize my daughter.
The Morris's daughter was traced to a hotel in Oklahoma City.
Within 4 hours, maybe, Oklahoma City police put together a sting operation.
Arrests were made, but police did not find the Morris's daughter. However, 3 days later, an anonymous tip led police to her. The Morris's daughter was taken to a local hospital. 10 days after last seeing her, Kyle and Brooke Morris were finally reunited with their 15-year-old.
As soon as I walked in the room, I was trying to be strong for her.
I was just able to just be her mom in that moment, and that was kind of refreshing.
I never would have thought something like this would happen. We just want to make sure people understand, one, that something like this can happen to anyone, anywhere. Even if you don't think it's possible, there's people out there that they want to make it happen.
Just truly frightening. Police made 5 arrests directly related to this case, and it remains under investigation. Authorities are still trying to identify the man seen in the security video walking out with the Morris's daughter from the arena. And a spokesperson for the American Airlines Center and Dallas Mavericks says they are glad the teen is now safe and wish her well on her road to recovery, and added the American Airlines Center has no evidence that any trafficking group has been in the arena at any time, including with respect to this incident.
Really an alarming story. All right, Eva, thank you. We do want to turn now for a check of the weather again. Meteorologist Danielle Breezy from our affiliate WKRN in Nashville is here in New York with the Father's Day forecast, and nice in some places. It looks like it is behind you.
This is really nice behind me, guys. I want to show you this. This is actually Pensacola, our Earth camera here. This is the sunrise. You can see it's a bit on the breezy side today. Going to be really hot in this area. Speaking of the heat, it is going to get really warm. Tomorrow feels like temperatures will need the triple digits from Minnesota all the way down to Texas. By the way, wouldn't it be Father's Day without some Father's Day cities? Here's your forecast, depending on whether you live in Father Mountain or Dadsville. That's a look at what's happening around the country. Here's what's happening where you live.
Early in the morning, it's the dawn of a new day, new hopes, new dreams.
Well, it's going to be another hot, humid, and windy day across.
Think of what you would have felt if your engagement had carried on for months and months before he chose to put an end to it.
Thompson made the Austin Society proud when she earned another Best Actress nomination for the film and won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay.
First, you must look beyond.
Thompson later introduced herself to a new generation in the Harry Potter movies.
Measles. Definitely.
And the 2005 hit Nanny McPhee.
Imagine your husband bought a gold necklace and come Christmas gave it to somebody else.
But Thompson says it is the classic movie Love Actually fans mention to her most often.
Why do you think that movie has resonated and endured in the way that it has?
Because of what it's about. It's the only thing that matters. All that matters is love. That's it.
Do you stop and watch Love Actually if it's on, like the rest of us?
I always sort of look at it and go, oh, look, oh, God, we all look so young. God, look at you, good hair. That's, oh, you know, that's, what was her name? And then I go and make the dinner. That's what happens.
Thompson's ever-present charm and quick wit, a reminder of where she got her start as a performer.
I often think how different life would have been if I'd done comedy.
I think you could do stand-up to this day. You've got the charisma that Joe will get you a Netflix special.
Yeah, yeah. Do you hear that? It's special.
There you go.
I'd watch that. While you're waiting for Emma's stand-up special, you can watch Good Luck to You, Leo Grand, streaming now on Hulu. Our thanks to the Whitby Hotel Reading Room in New York for hosting our conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to the Sunday Sit Down podcast to hear the full interview with Emma Thompson, with much more on her career and some hilarious stories that were just a little too hot for television. You can find that on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get yours. And next week, a new Sunday Sit Down from Los Angeles with actor and superstar director Jon Favreau on his start in the classic movie Swingers and his evolution to directing massive hits like Iron Man and The Mandalorian. Jon Favreau, next week on Sunday Today. Let's turn now and get a quick check of your local Father's Day Sunday weather.
It's going to be another hot and humid day across the region, along with the
Biden by just 4 in 2020. And in a special election last week, voters picked a Republican to send to Washington.
We cannot accept the increase of gas, of food, of medication. We cannot accept that. And we have to state the facts that under President Trump, we did not have this mess.
And Democratic strategist Maria Cardona is joining us for this conversation. So Maria, a lot going on in this district. There's going to be some redistricting of the lines, which will change what the district looks like. But that hasn't changed the sense of alarm from the Democrat who's going to be running in this new district. Vicente Gonzalez tells Politico on Wednesday, they have just forgotten about the brown people at the border, and that's basically what it is. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it anymore. They are taking Latinos in South Texas for granted. Are they? I mean, this is a little bit of a question of, are Democrats listening early enough to some of the warning signs that there's erosion here?
Well, there's several things going on here, Abby. As you know, I have been working on the Latino vote pretty much from the beginning of my political career. And what I have seen overall is that there has been tremendous growth with Democrats and the Latino vote. In 2004, with George W. Bush, we had a margin with Latinos of 700,000 votes. In 2020, it was a margin of 5.5 million. So our focus on Latino votes has been enormous growth for us. Now, I've also said
talking about at the presidential level?
I'm talking about nationally and in general.
Trump did better by 8 points with Latinos than Biden
did better depending on depending on where you look.
From 2016 to 2020 by 8 points.
He did better in some places. He did better in Miami-Dade. He did better in the Rio Grande Valley. But Joe Biden would not be president today if he had not won Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada, something that a Democratic president hadn't done in 80 years. But let me say this. I have always preached to the Democratic Party that we will not continue to grow our appeal with the Latino vote if we don't earn that vote every single day and in every single cycle. And that's what we have to continue to do.
Let's take a look at a little bit of what you're talking about here. There are differences in what's going on with the Latino vote. If you look at Texas, Florida, and Arizona, these are 3 districts that are a little bit, let's call them emblematic of what we're talking about. Florida 27, this is the Miami-Dade area. It went from being Clinton by 19 in 2016 to Biden by just 3 in 2020. Texas 15, that is on the Mexico border. Clinton 16 to Biden plus 2. Arizona, this is the Tucson area. So Arizona is a place that some Democrats say think that helped Biden win that state. Absolutely. It went from Clinton 29 to Biden 27. So not a huge shift, but still, in Texas and in Florida, there are big erosions happening in the Latino vote.
I think it's pretty clear line. Certainly in Florida, you have a number of Hispanic voters who fled socialist countries, and portraying Democrats as socialist is very politically effective. In South Texas, it's part of a larger national story about this sort of class realignment in American politics, and working class voters are now voting for more Republicans and across racial lines. And look, a place like South Texas, you have a history of voting for Democrats, but they're Texans. They often work in either the energy business or on the border and customs or border.
Myra Flores' husband is a border protection agent.
The nature of those jobs, the nature of living in South Texas is a fairly culturally conservative outlook. And I think they were voting the way that their grandparents and parents had voted for a long time, but eventually there does tend to be a sort of a shift in the voting, and that's what's happening in South Texas.
I do want to raise this question, though, that Jamar just raised, about the way in which, not just when we're talking about Latino voters, but Black voters and Asian American voters, when race and class start to do some funny things. Maybe voters think that their class identity is more important than their racial identity. How does the Democratic Party deal with that or message effectively around those issues?
Right. It's the reason why I'm not jumping in is because in some ways this feels like a media story instead of a political story. There's a way that reporters flatten out voting subgroups, so to speak, minority groups that ignores generation, religion.
To some extent.
They do, but it means that we're comparing Arizona, Florida, and in Texas, and they are wildly different populations of each. One thing I'll add here is that your point is very correct. When it comes to identity politics, we all have a quote-unquote hierarchy of our identities, right? Are you a mom first? Are you the wife of a Border Patrol agent first? Are you Latino first? Are you Latinx first? These things are also signifiers to political parties to say, like, wait a second, you can't just go from one state to another thinking one message is going to work. And I think Democrats have really suffered for a long time thinking that immigration was somehow the most important issue to this voting group. And I just don't think that's the case.
And the voter group is so complicated.
And Maria, I'll let you have the final word here.
It's not. It's the economy. And so this district, I don't think you can take what happened in this district and put it sort of as a big lesson. This district, Republicans outspent the Democrat by 20. And they only got to 51%. So I think if we had...
But you can spend a lot of money and fail. So I think it is...
Yes, but 20 to 1, and they only got out 7% of the vote. And I guarantee you, yes, is it a lesson? Yes. And all of the Democratic committees and Vicente Gonzalez are going to do everything they can to now compete in this. And I am completely confident he will win it. It's now a plus 15 Democratic district.
The investment is a big question, too. I mean, I think what you're hearing from some of these battleground members, the Latino battleground members, is where is the investment, and will it be at the level that they think they need to make it to counter a real Republican
This
investment?
happened in Wisconsin and Minnesota with Rust Belt voters at the time. Those staffers and workers there in those places said, why aren't you investing?
As a Latina, I never think it's enough, but they need to continue to do more, and I think they will.
A great conversation. We have to leave it there. Thank you, Maria Cardona, for joining us for that.
Thank you.
And coming up next for us, he's been hinting at it for months, but is Donald Trump ready to announce a 2024 bid this year?
Chilling. Line from Mulbridge to Pierre, headed into Todd and Bennett County and Cherry County, for that matter, in Nebraska. That's the upper level trough that I was talking about earlier. It's going to be in place and try and act as a focal point for showers and thunderstorms along and West River as we go through the evening and again into the first part of your night. This will also try and be our triggering mechanism on Monday as this traverses eastward and gives East River locations an opportunity to see some showers and a couple of thunderstorms. Some of those may also be strong to severe in intensity, but by Tuesday we do stay mainly quiet. Here is Monday's risk for severe weather. It is a marginal risk, level 1 out of 5 for just about the entirety of the viewing area, unless you are in the extreme southwestern South Dakota. Wind and hail are going to be the primary concerns with anything that does come around on Monday. Today we are talking about highs in the upper 90s to low triple digits in southeastern KELO. And yes, we do have that breeze out of the southeast, but let's face it, it is going to do nothing to help.
One day, this lecture hall will be made of code.
Thank you, Adam.
Adam, not a lot of weather there that would be affecting flights.
No.
Good, but we're still having flights canceled.
Right, which is what happened when my flight was canceled to Chicago and I couldn't get there. The weather was fine.
I know. All right, still ahead, smash and grab robberies popping up all over the country as voters prepare to send a message to soft on crime progressive district attorneys. Congressman Lee Zeldin wants to bring law and order back to New York State if he is elected governor, and he is here with us next. How are we doing?
And the countries are trying to go back in history regarding their economies, but also we
What are you going to do about it?
In your heart, you're praying in the authority of the name of Jesus. You're praying with a sincere heart. Then you.
One Phoenix business offering a so-called inflation buster. Employees getting bonuses of up to $500 in their paychecks this weekend and raises of up to $6 per hour.
Hopefully people will be a little bit happy. This won't change their life forever or anything like that, but hopefully they'll appreciate it.
I checked in with some businesses in 2021 in Delaware's Rehoboth Beach when they were having trouble finding employees. This year, easier hiring in many cases, but businesses have to get creative to help workers manage the cost of living.
It's hard to find housing.
Beach Patrol Captain Jeff Giles is working with the local Chamber of Commerce to find local families who have extra space and who are willing to rent to lifeguards for the season. A fourth-generation owned family business, Funland, is giving workers raises of at least $2 to $3 more per hour and are offering events for their employees.
We do picnics, barbecues, that kind of stuff. That also adds to the experience.
And with family budgets stretched and gas prices on the rise, hotel manager Benjamin Gray has even made fighting inflation part of the hotel's summer marketing.
We're offering gas cards and grocery cards as a part of specific promotions that we're offering. So if you come visit us, we will give you money to spend on your gas and your groceries. So the two things that may prevent you from traveling to our area, we're going to cover for you as a part of those promotions.
Ben says those gas and grocery promotions have been hugely successful so far. The hotel chain also has another inflation-related promotion. So if you are driving, the further from where you come, the more of a discount you get at their hotel. So they're doing their best.
I like that.
If you're paying for gas and groceries, I will come to your house, your house, anywhere I need to go.
If it's free, it's for me. That's what I always say. Deirdre, thanks so much.
Sure.
Stick around. Special edition of Pop News is next.
From prom dresses to work.
On their journey, his mom told him they were traveling to meet his hero, John Cena, though that was nothing more than a fantasy. Well, Cena happened to be working in Europe and caught wind of Misha's story online. he immediately hopped on a plane to surprise his big fan.
Misha, very nice to meet you. I've come a long way to see you. Very nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you.
The two met in Amsterdam, where they spent the day bonding while building blocks, eating cake, even comparing their muscles. Misha's mom said it was the first time her son had smiled since the war began. Cena also gave Misha one of his t-shirts that reads, "Never give up," and his very own WWE Championship belt.
Those words, never give up. We've all thought about those in our lives. They're very powerful. I think Misha's a great example, and Misha's mom. They're two great examples of how persistence can lead to joy, even through the toughest of times.
John Cena is just a great dude. Our first low on this Father's Day Sunday goes to a relatable moment for every kid who ever has been embarrassed by dad. It was refreshing for a lot of us to see even one of the coolest dads currently walking the planet get an eye roll from his daughter.
Back with us in the Bay and here at Chase Center tonight, 24-time Grammy Award winner, the one and only Jay-Z.
Dad, that is Jay-Z pulling in his daughter Blue Ivy for a quick hug in front of the crowd on the Jumbotron and millions more watching at home during Game 4 of the NBA Finals. The 10-year-old child of Jay and Beyonce shrugging off her dad instantly and asking him not to mess up her fabulous hair. One person on Twitter summarized the viral moment, writing, "To us, Jay-Z, all-time rap legend. To Blue Ivy, embarrassing dad." By the way, at 10, Blue Ivy already is impossibly cool, naturally. Our next high goes to retired Indiana kindergarten teacher Jane Pearson, who got the surprise of her life when a group of her former students dropped by her house to thank her on the day of their high school graduation.
What's going on? What's happening? Hi, Liz. Hi. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. These are your kindergartners. Did you know this was happening? Oh my gosh, I love you all. Look at you.
One by one they came in. Jane taught at the same school in Chesterton, Indiana, in the same classroom for 38 years before she retired 13 years ago. These students were the last kindergarten class she ever taught, and now they are graduating seniors heading off into the world. One of the students who coordinated the surprise with Jane's daughter said Mrs. Pearson was a one-of-a-kind teacher who went above and beyond for every child. Quite clearly, Mrs. Pearson touched many, many lives over her long career. Thank you, Mrs. Pearson, and thank you, teachers everywhere, for all you do. That is awesome. Our final low goes to a guy named Chris, who finished dead last in his fantasy football league this year. Maybe he drafted poorly, maybe it was injuries, maybe he just didn't have the kind of commitment it takes to be a champion of pretend football. Whatever happened, Chris had to face the consequences of finishing in last place, as agreed upon by the league. He was sent on a romantic dinner date with Winnie the Pooh.
Happy birthday to you.
Several months after the end of the season, Chris's buddies finally got him to an Italian restaurant for a nice two-top with a beloved plush toy. Not only did Pooh get his own meal of mussels and red wine, but the boys even arranged for that tableside sing-along, just to make sure no one missed the odd couple having an intimate dinner. Thankfully, Chris's friends were at a nearby table to document the entire evening out on the town. To be honest, doesn't look like the worst night out. 2 words for you on draft day this season, Chris: Jamar Chase. We'll be right back with your Sunday mugshots.
I saw Illinois Governor.
Crime outrage leave woman assaulted in New York and 2 cops dead in California, which is why the Post endorses Lee Zeldin, Republican candidate for governor, to fix New York. Big endorsement.
Be continued. Thank you all.
Thank you.
But before we go, today in the United States, we celebrate Juneteenth. For decades, Black Americans have marked June 19th as their true Independence Day. It is the day that 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, word of freedom finally got to the slaves in Galveston Bay, Texas in 1865. And this weekend, all across the country, there will be public parades and private family barbecues. And of course, now that it is a federal holiday, plenty of corporate and political statements attempting to latch on to the holiday's symbolic meaning. But we cannot forget the real reason that Juneteenth is a federal holiday at all. And that is 95-year-old Opal Lee. Here she is in 2020.
We need 1 million signatures to give to Congress to let them know it's just not one little old lady in tennis shoes.
Ms. Lee walked and walked and walked from Fort Worth, Texas to Washington, D.C. until they couldn't ignore her anymore.
It's not a black thing. It's not a Texas thing. None of us are free until we're all free. To have it actually happen was, can I use the phrase the children use? It was off the chain.
It is off the chain, and celebrating Juneteenth has always been about Black history, perseverance, and of course, joy. And it is about freedom for all of us. And tonight, you can join some of the biggest stars as they lift their voices for Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom, live at 8, only on CNN. And finally, I want to take a moment to thank our executive producer, Tasha Diakitis, whose last day at CNN was on Friday. I personally want to thank Tasha for her guidance and support, especially in this last year as I've taken over this show. And we will, of course, miss her so much on IP Sunday and wish her the absolute best. And to you at home, a happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, to my dad and to my husband, a happy birthday to my mom, and a happy Juneteenth to all of you. Have a great day.
Ready to style in just one.
To fire up and move through the area. It'll be Eastern KELO's turn Monday.
Stitchwork master, but your staffing.
And it made me really upset and angry because even though I disagreed with his policies, I did not want to see my president engage in this conduct. And so by the time the vote came, it was a very sober moment because I knew that I thought there was overwhelming evidence, but I didn't want to be in the position of having to sit in judgment of a president of the United States and finding that he had engaged not just in criminal conduct, but abusive conduct. And by the way, Watergate included much more than the break-in and the cover-up. It included illegal wiretaps. It included sicking the IRS on political enemies. It included all kinds of misuse of power with regard to Cambodia. And now we find out that the President Nixon tried to and succeeded in stymieing the Paris peace talks, thereby prolonging the Vietnam War and the death of Americans and the Vietnamese for 4 more years. His abuses of power were huge. And the interesting thing is he was held accountable, not fully, but partially.
All right, Elizabeth Holtzman, Michael Conway. I could do this probably for another hour, but we don't have the luxury of doing it for another hour. But thank you both for joining us on Sunday afternoon. Really appreciate it. We do have another hour of Velshi coming up, so please do not go anywhere.
What happens when performance meets
The audit committee came up with massive fraud, and then the papers don't want to write about it because they're complicit. They're every bit as guilty as the radical left Democrats.
So when you're going up and the wind is going bananas and that kind of stuff, it's almost like being sort of on a spaceship, and hopefully you don't have to get out and do things and then drive up. Let's just say it's kind of tough traveling.
4 hours is a long time.
It's a long
to not have to do things. I'll tell you that.
All right, so Jackie, Molly, Dr. Postel, Weekend Recharge team, would you rather that, what you just saw, the snow on top of Mount Washington, or the triple-digit heat? Good question.
Ooh, it's an easy one for me.
I know
You're
your
going
answer.
with the heat. I'm going with the heat.
Of course.
Yeah.
I got to go with the cold.
It depends how long I have to endure.
Right? Very true.
I don't know. I might go heat. I love snow. But I don't want to do that every day.
I'm part Yeti, abominable snowman, so I definitely would have to go with the cold.
Yeah.
Got to. There you go. All right, guys. Good times. Well, we have a lot of heat to talk about today, no doubt, on today's show. Plenty of it. All right. Reynolds, happy Father's Day, by the way. Thank you so much, Dr. Postel. Back at you.
Oh, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Happy Father's Day to everyone out there.
Cool.
All right, good Sunday morning and welcome into Weekend Recharge. I'm meteorologist Molly McCullum.
And I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris. We are joined, of course, by storm expert Dr. Greg Postel. And America's weekend depends on the weather.
We have another snapshot to look at like we do, I think, every day.
Yes.
And let's get to it
This
because
one is so interesting.
this map.
Good morning and happy Father's Day. I'm Jane Pauley, and this is Sunday Morning. Healthcare workers were hailed as heroes during the early days of the COVID pandemic. Who can forget the music and applause from rooftops and windows as they'd head home after another exhausting shift at yet another hospital overrun with the desperately ill. 2.5 years later, the pandemic is far from over, though it does appear the worst is behind us. And those men and women on the front lines, Leslie Stahl reminds us, are still on the front lines.
This was New York in the spring of 2020. But inside one of the city's premier hospitals, an even more apocalyptic scene.
Were you scared? We were terrified that we wouldn't be able to care for this surge of patients coming in. Every day was terrifying.
COVID combat ahead on Sunday morning.
Dance legend Mikhail Baryshnikov is still on stage at age 74. But he has other matters on his mind. In conversation with Anthony Mason this morning, memories of a Russia he left a long time ago.
It's been nearly 50 years since Mikhail Baryshnikov famously defected from the Soviet Union.
Does that seem a long time ago?
No, it's been very fast.
Now, as he stars in a new adaptation of a Russian classic, The Cherry Orchard, Baryshnikov has become harshly critical of his former homeland.
How has it been for you to watch what's happening in Ukraine?
Horrific.
Mikhail Baryshnikov, later on Sunday Morning.
Jim Croce left behind a remarkable number of hits before his untimely death in a 1973 plane crash. On this Father's Day weekend, Jim Axelrod talks with Croce's son, AJ, about loss and coming to terms with his father's legacy.
If I could save time in a bottle.
When Jim Croce died, he left behind a string of hits and a son just about to turn 2.
Do you have memories of your dad?
I have this memory of the warmth of embrace.
But now, this son says it's time to embrace his father's music. Croce Plays Croce, coming up on Sunday Morning.
He's the viral sensation who's finally coming out of his shell. David Pogue will introduce us to Marcel the Shell, one marvelous mollusk.
My one regret in life is that I'll never have a dog.
Marcel the Shell began life as a YouTube viral sensation.
He's just a guy in a place. He holds himself with a relaxed, easy dignity. It's not overblown.
And now, Marcel the Shell is a movie.
Coming up on Sunday Morning, they're gonna talk to the people that made the movie about me. I'm Marcel the Shell.
On this Sunday morning of Juneteenth, Mark Whitaker takes us on a very personal journey. John Blackstone reports from San Francisco and tells us there's trouble in paradise. Luke Burbank visits a Portland sports bar where every night is ladies' night. Plus Robert Krulwich on the fossils behind our fuels. A story from Steve Hartman. And more on this Sunday morning for the 19th of June, 2022. And we'll be back after this.
Local elections officials upheld their oath to their Constitution. A lot of them Republicans, as well as Democrats.
Just to be clear, you said you have evidence that the then president was involved in putting a fake slate of electors out there. Do you have evidence that he directed it?
You know, I don't want to get ahead of our hearing. We'll show during our hearing what the president's role was in trying to get states to name alternate slates of electors, how that scheme depended initially on hopes that the legislatures would reconvene and bless it.
Will we see that he directed it?
They didn't, and they pressed forward with it anyway.
Will we see that he directed it?
I don't want to get ahead of what we'll show you during the hearing, but we will show you what we know about his role in this.
Your committee sent a letter to Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. The letter went out on Thursday asking for her testimony. You obtained communication between Ginny Thomas and the lawyer plotting to overturn the election, John Eastman. What questions do you have for her?
Well, we want to know what she knows, what her involvement was in this plot to overturn the election. She has said that she is willing to come in and testify voluntarily. We're glad to hear that. Really, anyone with pertinent information, we want to hear from. And so we have a range of questions to ask her. Obviously, I think the committee will be interested, among other things, whether this was discussed with Justice Thomas, given that he was ruling on cases impacting whether we would get some of this information.
If you find the answer to that question is yes, do you agree with some of your Democratic colleagues like Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that Justice Thomas should resign or perhaps should be impeached?
Well, I think that at a minimum it suggests, and I think we know enough to say this already, that Justice Thomas, to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, should have nothing to do with any cases relating to January 6th, particularly regarding our investigation. Because, you know, we want our justices to uphold a standard that goes beyond what's lawful or unlawful to avoiding even the appearance of a conflict or impropriety.
Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren told my colleague Jake Tapper this week that some information has been provided on a confidential basis from your committee to the Justice Department. You know this, I'm sure you're hearing this. So many people watching your committee hearings are asking, what is going to come of this? Is the Justice Department going to file criminal charges? First question is, why haven't you given everything over to the Justice Department that they are asking for and they say they need in order to potentially do that?
I don't think Congress has ever done that, and I've been participating now in several investigations where there have been parallel investigations done by the Justice Department. Congress never says, hey, Justice Department, other branch of government, just come and go through our files. We also don't say, hey, we want to go over and just rifle through your files. When the Justice Department asks for things specifically, hey, you know, we're looking at a case, we're investigating this person, can you give us what you have? We work with them, and we'll work with them here. You know, I do want to point out the Justice Department has the subpoena power too. They can convene a grand jury, they can bring in witnesses. Traditionally, they don't wait for Congress to do that work for the department. So we're going to work with them. We want them to be successful in bringing people to justice. But I can't go into the private conversations.
Well, have you seen evidence that the Justice Department has already opened an investigation into the former president?
You know, just looking at the public record, I have not seen, for example, grand juries convene in places where I would think they would be convened if they were looking at some of the conduct, for example, that Judge Carter in California wrote. He believed that Donald Trump was engaged in multiple acts that violate the criminal laws.
You've been critical of the Justice Department for moving slowly. If you've done so much work, why not help them out?
Well, you know, we certainly will help them. We want them to particularize what they're asking for. And it's our intention when we conclude our investigation to make public our findings in great detail. But we have a job to do as well, and we are doing that, and we're doing this consistent with how our branch of government has operated and the executive branch has operated.
We've seen a lot of taped testimony from the hundreds, even more, of closed-door testimony that you've done as a committee. But why aren't you calling witnesses in a public way who might challenge the committee? Is that intentional because you don't want to deviate from the storyline that you're trying to present to the public and, of course, potentially to the Justice Department?
No. I mean, we are interviewing, frankly, anyone that has relevant evidence. We're putting that relevant evidence before the public, and we're doing it in a way that is the most cohesive and that we can get across the salient points to the public.
So like, why not subpoena Mike Pence, for example, if he won't? I know you asked him to testify voluntarily. That didn't happen.
You know, we're not taking anything off the table in terms of witnesses who have not yet testified. We would still, I think, like to have several high-profile people come before our committee. But at the moment, I can't disclose what private conversations may or may not be going on with respect to certain individuals, but there are still key people we have not interviewed that we would like to.
So Mike Pence is a possibility still?
You know, certainly a possibility. We're not excluding anyone or anything at this point.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and happy Father's Day.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And yet another Republican congressman who voted to impeach President Trump after January 6th won't be around next year. What does it say about the former president's hold on the Republican Party? We'll speak to one of the 10, Republican Congressman Fred Upton, next. Plus, what is the Biden administration doing to bring gas prices down? Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm is here exclusively.
So
President does this?
Well, you know, the Attorney General really shouldn't be reacting to particular provocations by particular politicians or criminals. I mean, that's not really the role of the Attorney General. The role of the Attorney General is to determine, based on the facts and the law, whether there's probable cause to believe that somebody has violated the federal law in the United States, and then to follow the criteria of the Department of Justice. You've got to look at the culpability of the defendant, to what extent they acted willfully to do a criminal act. You've got to look at the gravity and nature of the offense. Of course, this offense has massive implications for the rule of law in America. And you've got to look at deterrence. That is, do we want to move into a system of government where losers in presidential elections can try to overturn the election by nonviolent or violent means?
Given everything you know, if you were in his shoes, do you think this is a close call or not?
You know, I'll leave that judgment to them. I mean, one of the many things that Donald Trump destroyed during his time in office was the idea that the political branches have to respect the independence of the law enforcement function. You know, so that really is up to them. And we're talking about people who are very competent.
You're familiar with the law. You were a constitutional law professor before you got into this job. Do you believe that this is a close call for Merrick Garland?
I mean, again, I come back to the culpability of the defendant, the nature of the offense, which I think is extraordinarily grave here. It's hard to think of a more grave offense. And the question of deterrence, and is it important to deter coups and insurrections? And I would say yes, but I think that's as deep as I want to get into the weeds on it.
All right, I want to ask about a couple of things that came up at the hearing that I'd like some clarification on. First, I want to play something that Mr. Jacob, the Vice President's then counsel, he described the Vice President's refusal to essentially be evacuated by the Secret Service. But there was a specific detail he mentioned I want to ask you about. Take a listen.
Head of his Secret Service detail, Tim, had said, "I assure you we're not going to drive out of the building without your permission." And the Vice President had said something to the effect of, "Tim, I know you, I trust you, but you're not the one behind the wheel."
You had indicated a couple months ago how chilling this was. That felt like a hanging meatball hanging out here. There wasn't a follow-up on this. Why was the Vice President concerned that his head of detail wasn't the one behind that wheel?
Well, first of all, I think this was a moment of real courage displayed by Vice President Pence, because what he was saying was, I'm not leaving the Capitol until we count the Electoral College votes as required by the 12th Amendment of the Constitution and the Electoral Count Act. You know, the colloquial phrase, who's behind the wheel, could mean a lot of different things. It could mean, well, you know, who ultimately is commanding the Secret Service and telling everybody who's behind the, you know, who's
there was some question. We know that there was an acting deputy chief of staff that was a member of the Secret Service that the president had. I mean, is that where this is going? And do you have any other evidence to indicate that there were real concerns about who the Secret Service, who Pence's detail was listening to?
You know, but I don't want to get into that. To me, it's obviously of interest, and I'm sure it's of interest to Vice President Pence in terms of his own whereabouts and his own movement. But In terms of the big picture, we know that there was an organized hit against our democracy. There was an attempt, a successful attempt, to block the transfer of power, to impede Congress in the joint session counting electoral college votes, and then the effort to get Pence to declare these absurd powers to unilaterally reject electors. So I think he was wise not to have left the Capitol. None of us wanted to leave the Capitol. And when we were forced out of our chambers, I think that most members, certainly every member of my party, I know Ms. Cheney, most members were saying, we must complete this task tonight.
Are you pursuing this line of investigation more? Is somebody else? Or is this something that you feel like you've gotten everything you can to find out who was in charge of the Secret Service in that moment?
You know, this is not the hearing that I'm going to be conducting. You know, we've sort of divided up the labor, and I'm working on the mobilization of the mob and the domestic violent extremist groups, like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, and so on. So that's not a particular detail that I've been following.
Mike Pence a hero?
Well, you know, in a time of absolutely scandalous betrayal of people's oaths of office and crimes being committed all over the place, somebody who does their job and sticks to the law will stand out as a hero on that day. And I think on that day, he was a hero for resisting all of the pressure campaigns and the coercive efforts to get him to play along with this continuation of the big lie, this big joke that he could somehow call off all the proceedings himself. I mean, it likely would have forced everything into the House of Representatives for a so-called contingent election, where the GOP knew that they had a majority of state delegations, because we vote in a 12th Amendment contingent election on the basis of one state, one vote, rather than one member, one vote.
I want to talk about something you keep bringing up before when you're wondering, you know, if we're going to be more investigation, that deterrence has to be a part of the calculation here. I want to get to something, though, that Judge Ludig seemed to, he talked about the clear and present danger that we are in, and he added this in his testimony: to this very day, the former president, his allies and supporters pledged that in the presidential election of 2024, if the former president or his anointed successor were to lose that election, that they would attempt to overturn that 2024 election in the same way that they attempted to overturn the 2020 election, but succeed. Is there any change to the law that actually could prevent this, or are we, at the end of the day, you got to hope human beings are going to do the right thing? Can you legislate doing the right thing?
Well, there are a number of reforms to the Electoral Count Act, reforms to the protection of the right to vote, reforms to the electoral process that will dramatically reduce the chances that someone can succeed in trying to impose an exercise of political will over the rule of law. I think you're right that ultimately, if someone has no respect for the rule of law and believes only in their own power in an obsessive, narcissistic way, there's little that can deter that person, but there are things that can fortify us against them. And that is an important part of the committee's work. Perhaps the most important part of it is Judge Ludig was saying. I mean, the Judge Ludig, by the way, I mean, he's like Justice Scalia to the conservative right. He's like Robert Bork, and he is out there blowing the whistle saying there's a clear and present danger right now, heading into the 2024 elections, that Donald Trump and the Trumpist forces will attempt the same kind of maneuver to usurp the will of the people and just declare himself president. That's extraordinary.
You've talked in the last week that you've actually gotten new information. New information seems to come in all the time. Do you have new witnesses? Is it new people or new factual information?
Well, it's both. There are still people who are turning over information to the committee.
We saw new emails that we know from Mr. Eastman that came through. That's clear.
Yeah, and there are people who are just realizing that they are in possession of facts or evidence that the committee might not have. And the chairman has encouraged everybody to come forward, and you know, we've got a tip line.
You have useful information? Has this tip line provided you with actual concrete information that ended up being true, that you've investigated?
We know things this weekend that we didn't know last weekend.
And things that are going to be important facts that we didn't even know either?
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of a picture. But again, you know, the general story has been known for a long time. We have a president who, for whatever reason, refused to accept the results of a presidential election and then organized in a hit against American democracy through a number of different avenues to try to overthrow the election and install himself as president.
You're part of the investigation. Were sitting members of Congress, do you have evidence that sitting members of Congress helped the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers prepare for the January 6th insurrection?
You know, but I don't want to comment on specific members at this point.
Are there going to be, were members of Congress, but we've seen the release of that tour. Is that does that mean more is to come?
You know, there have been, there are different elements of this hit, and we're discussing all of them. There was, you know, the so-called Green Bay sweep, the attempt to overturn Joe Biden's lawful majority in the Electoral College. There was also a violent street insurrection and insurrectionary violence unleashed against the Capitol. We're going to tell all parts of it, and we're going to invoke the names of everybody relevant who was involved.
Jamie Raskin, member of the January 6th Committee, Democrat from Maryland. Happy Father's Day.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you coming and sharing your perspective. When we come back, gas prices, inflation, interest rates, all of it is rising, and so are fears of a recession. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers joins me next on where he thinks the economy may be headed.
Free speech is under attack.
The desk was also built for an office setup.
Carried out by the criminally minded and the insane.
So Fox News polling shows that there is a lot of strength behind some of these proposals at this point. Some of these proposals, background checks for guns, which by and large most of them are background checked before you do a purchase. 88% though, moving the legal age for an assault rifle purchase is at 82%, flagging for people who are a danger to themselves or others, those red flag laws, 81%, and banning assault weapons, 63%. There is a lot of momentum, at least among the public sphere, for doing this. Are you out of step with your constituents?
Okay, so first of all, what's important is that we look out for the rights of constituents. Constituents are asked poll questions. They're not asked questions about specific language within legislative text. It's the job of the lawmaker to look out for the interest and the rights of the law-abiding citizens they represent. And so with each of those provisions, I understand how they could get high popularity ratings when they don't define them. For example, you talk about banning assault weapons. There is no universal definition of what an assault rifle is. Very often the true distinction, it really depends on whether the stock pieces of the gun are made of wood or of plastic or of composite. And so the text does matter here. Because it's that text that will determine whether we're intruding unduly on the rights of the American law-abiding citizen, and doing so in a way that would actually deter violent criminal behavior.
Yeah, I want to ask you, you referenced this a little bit earlier, some of the internal inner workings of these conversations about this. Axios is reporting it this way, saying essentially Senator John Cornyn, who is the lead Republican on these negotiations, they said that one senator called it, quote, shut up and vote is what Republicans have been told to do. Axios also reported that you numerous times asked for more details, that you were rebuffed. And then they go on to quote a Cornyn aide who says this: he's been talking to and answering questions one-on-one from multiple of these members. He or our staff has been in particularly close contact with Crapo and Lee. So what is the deal? Are you getting answers to your questions? Yes or no? Do you think this internal dialogue with the GOP may kill the whole thing?
No, not getting answers to my questions, not at all. Now, Senator Cornyn and others have been sincere in reaching out to us and having conversations, but I still have yet to see bill text. I still have yet to have any of my questions dealing with the details of what the provision would do answered. You know, it's one thing, Shannon, if they can identify with reasonable particularity what the provisions will do. They haven't even been able to do that. And that's what concerns me, is that this gang of 20 emerged saying we've got a deal. There was no bill. There still is no deal. And yet we continue to be asked by colleagues, by constituents, by reporters, are you supporting the bill? Just as a number of senators are rushing to sign on to the bill, to say they support the bill when it doesn't exist. This is a very dangerous way to legislate.
Well, and
behind closed doors. You need the transparency of a public conversation with bill text in front of you.
Especially on an issue this big. Okay, I want to move to another top headline issue. The January 6th hearings continue to go on. What we heard this week is that the president had a number of his advisors tell him there was not enough evidence of fraud to change the election results to be in his favor for 2020. The president speaking out on that, the former president this weekend, here's what he said.
What you're seeing is a complete and total lie. It's a complete and total fraud.
All right, that's his take on it. Your own text messages have come up with respect to Mark Meadows. They've been highlighted. Here's what the Salt Lake Tribune said about that. Their headline, quote, new court filings raise questions about Senator Mike Lee's involvement in attempts to overturn the 2020 election. Your response?
Well, first of all, look, I knew how bad Joe Biden would be as president. I knew what a disaster he would be in the Oval Office. And there was some uncertainty in the wake of the election. As we approached the end of December, there were rumors that continued to circulate suggesting that some states were going to be withdrawing and reallocating their electoral votes. Because Congress has a role in that, and I as a senator would be required to certify those, I wanted to find out. So I communicated with Mark Meadows to try to find out whether the rumors were true. I couldn't get answers, so I reached out to state lawmakers in various states, not trying to influence anyone, simply trying to find out whether the rumors were true. The rumors weren't true. No state had any intention of withdrawing its slate of electoral votes, and that made it an easy decision on my part to vote to certify the results of the election.
Has the committee asked to talk to you in the form of a deposition or otherwise, and would you sit down with them?
No, they haven't.
Would you sit down with them if they did?
Oh, sure. Look, I'd always be willing to talk if they want to talk.
Okay, let's talk about one of our mutually loved issues out there, which is the Supreme Court. You clerked there. I just cover it and enjoy doing that. We're awaiting this decision. Your former boss, Justice Alito, the leaked opinion draft, if it holds true, will overturn Roe v. Wade. Listen, there have been protests that continue at the justices' homes. A guy has been arrested for plans to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh. Pro-abortion groups have declared literally, quote, open season on crisis pregnancy centers. There have been a number of attacks. Now, the FBI says it is investigating those attacks and those threats. The president this week signed a bill that will give more protection to justices' families. Are you satisfied that these threats, that these attacks are being handled properly?
No, I'm not. Because, Shannon, what we've seen is a deliberate attempt to isolate, demonize, and intimidate those justices considering signing Justice Alito's opinion, which everyone should read, by the way. It's fantastic. But as I predicted might be the case in my book, Saving Nine, that just came out a couple weeks ago, this would happen. They're trying to demonize them and intimidate them. The Justice Department has turned a blind eye to blatant violations of 18 U.S.C. Section 1507. The provision that prohibits people from showing up at the home of a Supreme Court justice to protest. And by not condemning those, by not prosecuting them, the Biden administration is propelling this and legitimizing the attacks.
Okay, we spent the top of the show talking about the economy with Brian Deese of the White House of the Biden administration. So I want to quickly ask you this. In a Washington Post article a couple weeks back, they said that even if Republicans get what they want, they don't have a plan for fighting inflation either. It says Republican politicians are instead fighting with Mickey Mouse, punishing immigrant children, complaining about fancy ice creams and Peloton, or otherwise waging culture wars. So if Republicans do regain the House and or Senate, is there a GOP plan to get the economy kicking again?
Yeah, look, my plan is simple. We need to focus on regulatory reform as the first order of business. That would help bring down inflation. We need to pass the REINS Act, which would make it so elected lawmakers, rather than unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, are passing our laws. Most of our laws, measured by volume, weight, word length, economic impact, you name it, are currently made by unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats. The REINS Act would fix that and bring down inflation.
All right, Senator Mike Lee, we will watch for the Supreme Court opinions again on Tuesday and Thursday this coming week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shannon.
Up next, we're going to bring in our Sunday group on confidence in the Fed and prospects for a Trump-Biden rematch in 2024.
one-of-a-kind outdoor pool, the Grand Falls Pool Lounge. Live it up and enjoy the fun.
Our exclusive True Shield film.
Joining me now is retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He's the former Director of European Affairs for the National Security Council. Thank you so much for joining us on a Sunday morning, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. Wondering, do you agree with this timetable assessment that we noted from the top, from the NATO Secretary General, that we should essentially be ready for this war to now take years to settle?
I think Secretary Stoltenberg's assessment is actually astute and fairly comprehensive. He's talking about stability in Europe, which for the U.S. is a vital interest. It's going to have broad effects, both from a security and an economic perspective. These shocks that we're seeing that are affecting inflation domestically are likely to last as energy and commodity markets are disrupted for a long time. So I think from that standpoint, we're in for some shocks for quite some while, probably even maybe a nudge towards recession. But from a security standpoint, he's also hitting on something that really didn't necessarily have to be. It didn't have to be a long war if NATO and the U.S. had come in with more support early on and tipped Russia's decision-making about this war against a protracted war. We're now back to something akin to a 2014 scenario where Russia went in, invaded Ukraine, and thought it had achieved enough damage to establish a failed state scenario. Now they're in it for the long haul, either to gain some territory in the east or just to purely destabilize Ukraine for the foreseeable future. And in so doing, wait out the West, wait out NATO, when we start taking our eye off the ball, moving in a different direction, and then Ukraine does become a failed state on the border of NATO and the EU.
So what you're essentially talking about is a war of attrition that will last years, have a terrible economic impact across the globe on everything from energy to the food market. Your solution is something that can't be done, because you argue that we should have done more on the front end as a preventative measure to intimidate Putin from going into Ukraine. Would that not have upped the stakes, though? Couldn't we have been dragged into an even more deadly war with potential for even more death and economic destruction if we had gone in harder early on?
Definitely not. I think that the assessment is Putin was quite keen on conducting this war to achieve either conquer Ukraine or make it a failed state, and we could have indicated the kinds of costs that Russia was going to bear. This is not going to be a costless war for Russia also, but at this point, a war that the Russians are willing to bear the cost for. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be a years-long war just yet. I think that we're headed more likely than not, we're headed into a protracted war scenario. But Russia is burning through a large portion of its military. It's not just the equipment, it's also a ready military force, the personnel. And with sufficient weapons coming through in the next several months at a higher ops tempo than we're seeing now, this does not have to play out in a long war scenario. Russia's ground forces could be broken in the east and in the south, and that could be a means to kind of compel a negotiated solution. We shouldn't take it as a foregone conclusion that this is going to play out for years, then meter in aid just in time, or frankly, in cases a little bit too late. We should go ahead and start to open up the spigot, as indicated by Lend-Lease, as indicated by the rhetoric, and support Ukraine to deliver a defeat to the Russian ground forces, the heart of Russia's armed forces, and use that as a means to compel a negotiated solution.
Yeah, and there's very difficult diplomacy, obviously, around here, right? This week, NBC News reports that back in April, President Biden asked Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Secretary of State Tony Blinken to just tone down the rhetoric after they publicly said that the administration wanted Ukraine to win the war against Russia. You tweeted about this story. What do you make of it? Are they just being too cute here, or should we be upfront that is the ultimate objective?
Well, I think there are two. What we're seeing is, frankly, the public-facing contest between two factions within the U.S. government, and frankly, probably within the NATO alliance. There is the kind of unfortunate pattern that's played out over the course of at least 2 decades, if not 3 decades, of Ukraine's independence, which is putting the relationship with Russia first. Understandably, to a certain extent, because Russia is a major nuclear power, but one where we should understand that they're an adversary. We're not going to make a lot of headway with them, and it's going to take some hard power and, frankly, holding our ground in order to protect our interests. And the other faction is recognizing the fact that the old formula has not worked, and that the only way to secure the U.S., whether that's economically or from a purely national security perspective, is to provide Ukraine the means that it needs to deliver a defeat to Russia. In so doing, have Russia turn away from its desire, more often than not, to use military force or law enforcement or security services to achieve its political aims.
All right, retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, thank you so much for joining us on a Sunday evening, even to discuss this bleak news. I really do appreciate it. All right, coming up, good news for parents with young children waiting on that COVID-19 vaccine. Children as young as 6 months are now eligible for the jab. Hallelujah. This is Velshi.
First 5 episodes right now at foxnation.com. All right.
Severe eczema. Cmgus.
Something. I'm really proud of the venue for canceling his concerts. I do think it's extremely risky and it sends the wrong message. We don't want to reward people ever, even if they are mentally ill, for sending a message that it's okay to shoot a president and you can get over on the system.
And speaking of his career, here is video of him singing, then we'll discuss.
You're in my dreams most every night. You're still looking fine. High up on a pedestal. I'm so glad you're mine. Life here.
So Dr. Gardier, as you know, he is free, as I mentioned, and so he does have the right to live his life as he wants to. Do you think that this, in terms of how he lives from here on out, we of course don't want him targeted by people who don't like him, but again, the Reagan Foundation not happy that he's profiting off the fact that we all know who he is, his infamy?
Well, you really shouldn't be profiting off of it, and really it's about him keeping his mental sanity at this particular time. So putting himself out there to a lot of criticism about whatever talent or lack of talent that he may have might be something that may put him in a compromised situation. But I agree with Casey. We don't want a situation where a person is profiting off of this kind of infamy. I think it's really important that we set an example that if you're able to get through a mental illness, that you are rewarded by that with more mental stability.
And is it worth the risk saying, oh, we apologize, we were wrong? Apparently he wasn't in remission. We shall see. Thank you both for your expertise. Casey Jordan, Dr. Jeff Gardier, always a pleasure. Thanks.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
And this.
A mindless eating machine. It will attack and devour anything. It is as if God created the devil and gave him jaws.
This changed the way I look at the ocean, even a bathtub when I was that young. Part of the trailer from the Universal Pictures blockbuster, Jaws. That is today's flashback, where we look back at memorable moments in history and pop culture. It was this week, 47 years ago, that Jaws hit theaters across the U.S. and had Americans everywhere vowing not to go in the water back in the summer of '75. This iconic film left us with several signature lines, like "Get out of the water" and this one.
need a bigger boat.
Well, Jaws won 3 Oscars and was the breakthrough film for director Steven Spielberg, who was just 28 when the movie was released. It set the all-time box office record at the time. And that sound, the score for the movie, just as famous as the shark itself. Sammy the Bull Gravano was a feared mobster and right-hand man of John Gotti until he turned on him. A sneak peek at tonight's episode of the HLN hit series, Very Scary People. A story of murder, betrayal, and survival is ahead.
Can a cream really reduce wrinkles in blind?
Then another?
Yeah, certainly time in a bottle does.
If I could save time in a bottle, the first thing that I'd like to do.
It's incredibly emotional.
Why?
Well, because, you know, it was written for me, and it sums up this emotion that he felt for my mother and for myself.
If I could make days last forever, if words could make wishes come true.
I feel all kinds of things. I feel joy, a sense of thoughtfulness.
I'm sure you'll process this loss the rest of your life.
We all do, yeah.
Does playing his music help you process the loss?
If it's not the cure, it's a really good remedy.
Looked around enough to know you're the one I want to go through time with.
Tried to just totally dismantle democracy. So are any of the people with the fancy titles going to be brought to justice?
You're talking about the president.
The president of the United States and anybody else in his cabinet or around him that had any knowledge of this should be held accountable.
Well, on that note, Alyssa, if I may, one of the questions that we've been asking since these hearings started is whether or not the committee can prove intent, whether the president intentionally tried to overturn the election knowing that he actually lost. He told you in November of 2020 that he lost when you were working in the White House.
He admitted, he blurted out watching Joe Biden on TV, "Can you believe I lost to this guy?" And he actually admitted in a press conference when he was speaking to the about coronavirus in the press briefing room, he actually slipped and kind of admitted that Joe Biden won. I think intent is going to be hard. I'm not of the mind that this is going to take down Donald Trump in a legal sort of way, but I do think it's going to inform the public about a man who lost and couldn't do what we've done for the entirety of our history, which is, you know, allow a peaceful transition of power and allow who the voters elected to step into office.
Hey, Dana, two things that are really striking to me. One, the last couple of weeks, his circle of advisors shrunk dramatically. Barr, Ivanka, Jared, others were gone. So the people that he was getting advice from, they just weren't giving him good advice, number one. And I was shocked. And the Vice President Pence and I were very, very close. When I was an ambassador in New Zealand, he was my go-to guy. I worked exclusively with him all the time. I have a tremendous amount of respect. The fact that people were 40 feet from him and potentially were going to hurt or kill him, that's what shocked me the most out of everything that I've learned out of these hearings.
I want to turn back to the economy. And Nina, the president, Joe Biden, did an interview last week with the AP, and on the question of a recession, here's what he said. First of all, it's not inevitable. Secondly, we're in a stronger position than any nation in the world to overcome this inflation. You live in the real world in the Midwest.
I mean, we may be in a stronger position than any other country in the world, but the people in this nation right now are hurting. The confluence of the pandemic, the confluence of this inflation, and quite frankly, the cavalier attitude that many in the elites have about the suffering of everyday people in hoods all around this country, whether they're rural hoods, urban hoods, or suburban hoods. This is real. I mean, look, the gas prices in California, for example, are higher than the federal minimum wage. In my state of Ohio, gas prices are over $5 a gallon and don't need premium, because if you need premium, even in Ohio, you're paying almost $6. There are things that can be done. You know, I was talking to stratification economist Dr. Derek Hamilton, who was saying that we understand that inflation at some points are, you know, will happen. But what will we do as a nation to drive down the level of pain that people are feeling in this country when they can't afford their food, they can't afford gas? You got to go to work, but you can't afford the gas. There are things that can be done. The Fed can actually be a lender too. The Fed can jump in here. They can do more than just increase rates. They can actually jump in here and do something. So more has to be done.
And she's doing, actually, I agree with everything you just said. My daughter is expecting the whole baby formula thing. They knew or should have known. It's the whole supply chain issue. The Fed raising interest rates, inflation, stop spending. Thank God for Joe Manchin. Because, but not for him, we would have been in a worse
Senator,
situation.
We're not going to thank God for
Yeah, we are. Because
this is not about
listen,
spending.
when I was there, respectfully, when I was there, it was $9 trillion national debt. We're at $30 trillion. You can't keep spending and spending and spending and expect inflation.
We have 20 seconds left. Audie, I want to get you back in.
Excellent messenger right here. I don't know if Biden needs a Matthew McConaughey type to come out and start talking about the economy. Remember, he was Obama's number 2. Obama was the messaging person there. So I think this is going to be complicated to find something that the party can coalesce around and talk
Everybody, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming in. Happy Father's Day.
Thank you. Happy Father's Day.
Congrats on the new grandbaby coming. Up next, celebrating Juneteenth. I'll speak with the Congresswoman who is part of making this important date a federal holiday about why it matters. Next.
Life.
Uvalde, Texas, a small town that has become yet another landmark. Back now with our NBC News exclusive.
Welcome back. Data download time. Gas prices are spiking just in time for summer travel season, and Americans are simply begging for relief. But there's a variety of factors contributing to the surge in prices, meaning there may not be a quick fix to bringing down fuel costs. It's not just about turning on the spigot, if you will. Look, the price of gas, national price here, over $5 in raw dollars, highest we've ever done. If you were to factor in inflation, this is actually not the all-time high for gas, but it is in today's dollars. Now, part of the reason why gas has spiked is not just the price of oil, it's the issue of refining. In fact, 730,000 fewer barrels per day were refined in 2021. That created part of our capacity problems that we had. Much of this, we've had an idling issue. You've got obviously the sanctions against Russia. So you had 30% of our capacity essentially idled thanks to those sanctions on Russia. Overall, daily capacity has dropped 1 million barrels in our refining capacity since early 2020. So again, this is not the actual oil that we need or are looking for. We have that. It's the ability to turn it into actual gasoline. And if you want to understand what goes into the price of a gallon of gas, we can show you here, but it's the price of oil takes up most of it. But refining capacity is becoming a bigger chunk. You can see down in January of 2021, refining capacity was less, the taxes and things like that. Now, the amount of money refining is contributing to the price of gas is growing and growing at a much faster rate than other factors that go into a gallon of gas. So this is the biggest problem we're dealing with. It is the ability to return more oil into gas. And as you can see, again, this is not the all-time high. The all-time high was back in 2008. But of course, in today's dollars, it is over $5. But if you're looking back at previous dollars, we would be at about $3.50. When we come back, why more Democrats are getting nervous, saying maybe President Biden shouldn't run for re-election. That's next.
Think he's posting?
To see you just a couple days away now from the impeachment trial of Attorney General Ravnsborg. What's the atmosphere there in Pierre?
Hey, Brian, yeah, you know, I think a lot of the lawmakers who are going to be a part of this, of course, has to come gavel in. They won't be a part of it. And the Senate are starting to feel that this is a very heavy responsibility. You know, we're not just talking about broad specifics anymore. We're talking about what time the Senate's going to gavel in, what time they're going to gavel out. And we're less than a week away from a decision on whether or not Attorney General Jason Ravnsborg is going to be impeached. So I think the atmosphere here is starting to get tense. People are starting to very much feel the moment, and it's going to be very interesting. I think there will be a lot of spectators here to kind of watch this piece of state history.
Let's talk a moment about the office of the Attorney General. We've got the GOP convention coming up here in just a couple of days. It's delegates that choose who the Republican candidate will be for Attorney General. We're down now to DCI Director David Natvig and former Attorney General Marty Jackley. Attorney General Ravnsborg has removed himself from the race. So what has been going on behind the scenes, to your knowledge, in terms of delegates being contacted by both of these camps?
Yeah, obviously we're in the final stretch for that as well, too. That comes right after impeachment. These two Attorney General candidates are beginning to make their final pitch to these delegates. Now that the delegates have been settled after the primary last week, you know, the dust is settled and all these candidates are writing letters, making calls, trying to see where everything stands. Now, in terms of the Attorney General race, I think it's going to be interesting because there is a sort of anti-establishment feel against former Attorney General Marty Jackley in terms of, you know, some of the EB-5 stuff, representing T. Denny Sanford recently on that child pornography case. I think there is sort of a sentiment that David Natvig, outside of Ravnsborg, removing Ravnsborg from the picture, is kind of that anti-establishment candidate. However, Marty Jackley has obviously been a fixture at these Republican dinners, these Republican events, and has a strong record when he was Attorney General. It's going to be a really interesting matchup, and it's not the only matchup to watch going into this convention, Brian.
Does one candidate have an advantage over the other at this point, or do we know?
You know, Brian, I think in the Attorney General's race, you'd have to go with the previous Attorney General and Marty Jackley. Again, he's just been around for so long. He's a fixture in that office. You know, he obviously argued the Wayfair case before the United States Supreme Court. But again, David Natvig, I think, has a good resume. He's been a state's attorney. He's a veteran. He's been in that office as the DCI director. So I wouldn't count him out, and I think there's a path for him to win the race. I do.
We're going to walk around this next question a little lightly, but once Ravnsborg removed himself from the AG's race, behind the scenes he was sort of pushing David Natvig as the candidate, and there has been some murmurs, I guess, wondering if perhaps Natvig would return the favor for that support by putting Ravnsborg in some sort of position should Natvig become the Attorney General. And you actually asked Natvig about this.
Yeah, Brian, I actually have talked to him several times over the course of the last several weeks, and I really get the impression that he's running for Attorney General for himself and for the state of South Dakota. And obviously there's the shadow of Jason Ravnsborg that I don't think he'll be able to totally escape, given the fact that he currently works under Attorney General Jason Ravnsborg and has been a big supporter of Ravnsborg in the past. But I've asked him straight up a number of times, are you going to appoint Jason Ravnsborg to any position in that office, not just DCI director? Is he going to be the front desk clerk at the Attorney General's office? And he has been adamantly saying no for a number of weeks. And, you know, I've asked Jason Ravnsborg if he has any interest in working in that office, should Natvig win, whether or not he gets impeached, and the answer is no. So I just think the idea that Jason Ravnsborg is going to be in the Attorney General's office in 2023 in any capacity is just not true at this point in time.
We always appreciate the insight of State House reporter Austin Goss coming to us from our newsroom in the capital city of Pierre. Austin, thanks.
Thanks, Brian.
And coming up, a mass arrest involving 2 Sioux Falls men and a white supremacy group is raising questions in South Dakota. We'll be taking a closer look next.
Come to the Hot Tub and Swim Spa Blowout Expo this weekend at the Ramkota Inn Exhibit Hall, Sioux Falls. See the largest display of hot tubs and swim spas ready for immediate delivery, and financing is available. Major brands up to 50% off this Friday through Sunday.
Clark.
I'm not getting better. The world needs my help, and I'm, just taking a sick day.
If she can do that to Superman, what chance?
Love you and I care in a special.
Voters are very unhappy with how Biden is handling inflation, about gas prices. The president's approval rating remains low, and so people are citing gas prices as one of their top concerns. So those things all line up for Democrats in a really troubling way. I mean, and they are issues that it's very hard for them to show a lot of movement on, and the country's really frustrated. As Biden, as you mentioned, Biden said this week in an interview, the country's really, really down, and so you're going to have to see if that number will have to tighten a lot more, I think, to account for that.
Okay, so we have heard a lot of whispering amongst all the frustration, Howie, about all of these growing numbers of articles. Some people on the record publicly saying, others privately saying they don't think that President Biden should run again and whether he should. The Atlantic, a writer over there, not exactly a conservative publication, said, "Let me put this bluntly, Joe Biden should not run run for re-election in 2024. He is too old. What do you make of all these whisper campaigns and coverage on that front?
They are getting a lot louder. By the way, there's a lot of anger out there, too, amplified by the media and social media and, of course, our political system. There was a New York Times story a few days ago that was just an absolute game changer, because here you have the Times saying, quoting Democrats on the record as saying they have doubts about Joe Biden's age, his mental acuity, many saying he should not run for a second term. This is his own party. And it kind of got the story through customs. It made it safe for everybody else to talk about it.
Right.
You turn on TV, it's, you know,
And they did, yeah.
People like David Axelrod saying he's not as agile in front of a camera as he used to be, and he'll be closer to 90 than 80 at the end of a second term. So the White House takes this very seriously, attacked the story as salacious. Actually, it was reporting. And the thing is, you know, you've heard a lot of these things from conservative media. Now you have everybody talking about it. It's not good for Joe Biden. And the officials take this so seriously that they obviously cooperated with the Washington Post piece yesterday saying, oh, no, Joe Biden is running. He's going to announce next year. We're all set. This is a guy who's wanted to be president since 1987 when he dropped out of his first campaign, which I covered. He doesn't want to give up this job, but he doesn't have the full support of his party right now.
Okay, but Harold, where does the party go? Because there are concerns and whispers about the vice president as well, and whether the field would completely open up if the president decided not to run again.
It's hard to see President Biden not seeking re-election. I would say if gas prices were down, food prices were down, people felt confident, people wouldn't be as bothered by some of these things. They'd say, wow, he knows exactly what he's doing. A stumble up the stairs, a little stumble over words, it doesn't matter. They've got to get the policies right. I'd be focused there as opposed to trying to respond to mental and physical acuity. Get the policy acuity right. You do that, people will begin to think and talk differently.
You got 5 seconds,
I'll
Ben.
just say that when Bernie Sanders did that debate with Lindsey Graham that Brett Baer hosted, he looked a lot livelier than Joe Biden.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Does that mean you're going to support Bernie Sanders, Ben?
I'm not saying
that. Bernie's ears. Okay, panel, thank you very much. We'll see you next Sunday. Up next, a final word on the week ahead.
Fox News Sunday is brought to you by Charles Schwab.
Parts of KELO. This is what it looks like in Roscoe, South Dakota, about 40 miles west of Aberdeen. The mayor, Leland Trickle, sent us these photos and called it one of the worst storms he's seen in that area in the past 45 years. Flying debris created quite a mess of broken windows, downed sheds, and numerous uprooted trees. Another viewer shared several pictures of storm damage, with several structures either damaged or destroyed. Power outages have also been a common issue with that storm. Leola and Frederick reported similar damage. On radar, the storm started last night near Hot Springs with hail ranging from tennis ball to baseball in size. You can see the intense signature of hail on Viper during the late evening. The storms eventually tracked toward KDLT with a downburst of tennis ball size hail driven by winds up to 90 miles per hour. The storm line made a track toward the pier area before intensifying in the pre-dawn hours near Aberdeen. The frequency of these overnight destructive wind storm systems underscores the importance of weather radios like this during the summer season. For KELO Weather, I'm meteorologist Brian Carson.
I don't know why, but Rachel seems to think I play lacrosse.
What did you play?
Water polo.
Is that like
school?
Is water polo like Marco Polo?
Stroke. Report fever, stiff muscles, or confusion
across time. And in addition to that, have to show that the advantages, that the wealth advantages that white people have gotten, for example, has been a result of policies that have benefited them. And it's not just from this rhetoric of hard work and diligence and that type of conversation that actually includes what had happened historically and in the present moment.
And Robin, pretty quickly here, a new documentary being shown at the Tribeca Film Festival titled The Big Payback follows your journey to obtain $10 million to be distributed to Evanston's black residents as reparations, and Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's fight to get H.R. 40 passed after all this time. Let's listen to a quick clip.
We were so excited when we saw the legislation. In fact, we have used it in presentations that we've made.
Wow.
I use your outstanding construct. You've been, Councilmember, a real hero to me. Really
Thank you. Thank you. Being a member of National League of Cities, you know, we learned that all government starts locally. And the thought was, why not do what we can do here at a local level while HR 40 is working through its process, through your leadership? We could have layers of repair and layers of remedy because, as we know, those damages, yes, we're rooted in slavery, but, you know, it looked like discrimination even still today because of the color of our dark skin.
All right, Robin, we have half a minute here. I'm so sorry, but what can reparations advocates learn from that film and from your work?
Well, you can learn that the process is complicated and it must start. That's how you do reparations, you start. You can learn that there are over 100 cities now that are advancing local reparations and that we have more support ever in Congress. You can call for order to be signed by President Biden for the commission to be established. And you can see a free screening of The Big Payback at the Apollo Theater today in New York City, sponsored by Ben & Jerry's. Thank you.
Ooh, Ben & Jerry's, that sounds delicious. Robert J. Patterson, thank you so much. That does it for me. Thank you for watching. Happy Juneteenth. Also, happy Father's Day. Enjoy your afternoon naps, all dads out there. The Sunday Show with Jonathan Capehart begins right now.
Good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Show. I'm Jonathan Capehart. This Sunday, the fragility of American democracy is being exposed by hearing. The January 6th committee will conduct its fourth public hearing this Tuesday. And if it's anything like the two this week, the biggest takeaway, Donald Trump and his allies knew he lost the 2020 election and that their scheme to overturn the results was illegal. And yet, they attempted it anyway.
We're changing people's lives.
Oh, our lives are certainly changing. Coming up, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on the #1 threats to America today and the mistakes that got us here, from foreign policy to economics. This as Joe Biden claims it's, quote, bizarre to blame him, even as the president's approval rating plummets, with key voting blocs abandoning him. Minorities, independents, and now business.
These are very treacherous times, Maria. Look, frankly, the lack of leadership in Washington is discouraging. For the President of the United States, not once, to say, I made a mistake or this is my fault. If you'll look, every single thing that's happened negative, the devil made me do it or somebody. What is he going to?
Wherever you find yourself in this moment, joining us in the room or out.
Taken nearly 30 years. Top CEOs and economists now expect a recession soon as Americans start to pull back on spending. Consumer sentiment hit its lowest levels on record last month. We're going to discuss it all with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen after this report from Chief Business Correspondent Rebecca Jarvis.
From gas prices to rent, soaring inflation forcing the Federal Reserve's hand this week. For the first time since Bill Clinton was in office nearly 30 years ago, the central bank hiking interest rates 0.75%.
What they're responding to now is a robust and growing economy.
Symptoms of heat-related illnesses. Symptoms of heat exhaustion include heavy sweating, feeling tired, muscle cramps, and nausea.
Middle phase that we're in, the West must help Ukraine strengthen its position. Kyiv needs more weapons and training. And while there are real limits to how much the Ukrainians can absorb, Washington and its allies must redouble their efforts. They also need to help and break the Russian blockade around Odessa. People have focused on the collapse of the Russian economy, which will probably shrink by about 11% this year. But Ukraine's economy is likely to contract by a staggering 45% in 2022. Unless the country can export its grain out of its Black Sea ports, it could face economic calamities for years to come.
Playing in this beautiful theater, and it's got me.
In 2017, Baryshnikov was given Latvian citizenship.
It means something. My mother is buried there. And that's why, back to your question about why now, that idea that I would say Russian tanks would go again to Baltics.
You're afraid for Latvia?
I'm afraid for all that part of the world, and because I am part of it.
Recently, he co-founded the charity True Russia to raise money for Ukrainian refugees. When Russia banned its website earlier this month, Baryshnikov addressed an open letter to President Putin. Your Russian world, the world of fear, he wrote, will not live on as long as there are people like us.
What did you think when Putin to support the West are scum and traitors?
You know, this is...
Do you think of this as Russia's war or Putin's war?
It is Putin's war. He's trying to create new history of Russia. He does not care about people at all. Although how it's possible, he has kids himself. You know, how it's possible.
Russians who speak out against him have a way of kind of disappearing.
Listen, I will be 75 years old. What I have to lose? My old master, that will be your grandfather.
As he performs